Hello girls and boys and grown-ups, here we are at St Luke's Church and we're going to sing a song as we often do. Of course it's about Jesus and we need our hands to do some clapping. Some of you know this well, and if you don't know, it's a very easy one to learn and you need to do a clap in the middle, so let's get ready. If Jesus is the King, clap your hands. If Jesus is the King, clap your hands. If Jesus is the King, He's in charge of everything. If Jesus is the King, clap your hands. How'd you go with the claps? All right? And of course, we've got to nod our head. If Jesus is the King, nod your head. If Jesus is the King, nod your head. If Jesus is the King, He's in charge of everything. If Jesus is the King, nod your head. Now, of course, Jesus is the King, and you know how we know He's the King? Because of the great events of Easter time. And let me draw what took place. Do you remember at Easter time? Jesus was killed on Good Friday. We remember he gave his life. He died on the cross. He had done nothing wrong, of course. He had nothing deserving of being killed like that. There were two other people who were killed that day too, and they had done some things wrong. But Jesus in the middle, he hadn't done anything wrong. In fact, he was getting into trouble, not for things that he'd done, but for things that we'd done. He was taking the punishment that our sins deserve. Wasn't that kind of him to do that for us? And we remember that they took Jesus' body down from the cross and put it in a tomb and rolled a great big stone over the front so that no one could get in and no one could get out. And there he lay, his body in the tomb. But then Jesus, of course, is the King. He's stronger even than death itself. And so on Easter Day, on Easter morning, the women came down because they loved him very much. They came down to see the tomb, to see his body. And guess what? The stone had been rolled away. And they looked inside the grave and there was no body to be found. Jesus had risen. He was alive. And that's why we sing our song that Jesus is the King. He's in charge of everything. So on that day, he took care of everything we've done wrong. We can be forgiven because he took the punishment our sins deserve. And then he conquered death. The tomb was empty. He's alive. Jesus is the King. Will we sing it again? We've got a few more verses to add too. Let's start from the beginning. If Jesus is the King, clap your hands. If Jesus is the King, clap your hands. If Jesus is the King, He's in charge of everything. If Jesus is the King, clap your hands. A little faster. If Jesus is the King, nod your head. If Jesus is the King, nod your head. If Jesus is the King, He's in charge of everything. If Jesus is the King, nod your head. Before we go any further, you know what? You could actually draw this. You could get a piece of paper when we've finished, and you could draw this beautiful picture of Jesus who's died on the cross and gave his life for us, and then rose again to life. And if you're a good writer, or someone else can write this for you, you can write down the side, Jesus is the King. What a great picture that would be. But before we finish, we've got to sing the last two verses. Jesus is the King, clap your hands, nod your head. How about stamp your feet? If Jesus is the King, stamp your feet. If Jesus is the King, stamp your feet. If Jesus is the King, He's in charge of everything. If Jesus is the King, stamp your feet. How about hooray? If Jesus is the King, say hooray. because Jesus is the King. King Jesus be with you today. Goodbye. See you next time.